All right, so we're going to start with a little bit of kind of context for each of you, give each of you a bit of a chance to share your perspective on land use. And Andrew, we're going to start with you.
Kia ora, welcome everybody. My business has been involved in land use change throughout its inception. In original days it was sheep and beef to dairy, and more recent times it's been to permanent crops such as kiwi fruit and cherries. This is a land use change that I'm most excited about, and had some fun recently on LinkedIn asking people what sort of crop this was, and I think the first answer was olives, but in fact it's a hill country farm in the Wanganui district, 1350 hectares. We've planted it in Manuka in 2019 and 2020. It's selected for high nectar and high UMF, and it's one of four properties that we currently manage. So this is hill country, probably never suited to pastoral production. It's highly erodible. It's relatively high. It's economically challenging. We've been able to establish a superb Manuka forest on this property. We're only 3 or 4 years into production. We harvested 27 tonnes of honey. We're earning about $1,400 a hectare, even though we're expecting to double our hives next year, and that's high UMF honey worth about $70 a kilogram. We're registered in the ETS. We've probably got some quite optimistic carbon tables. We don't think it'll pan out quite as good as we've got, but this is a crop which will give us a great return over 15 to 20 years, and at the end of that period we'll need to make a decision as to whether we replant in better varieties of Manuka, or in fact let it revert back to full native, or do a combination of those two things. So economically, very successful. There's a development margin, there's good cash returns generated, but we're providing some great environmental services with biodiversity and reduced erosion from the property. So yeah, very excited by this project.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andrew. A fascinating project. We're going to turn to Geoff.
Kia ora koutou. Ngā mihi nui koutou. Great work, by the way. That's awesome.
Feel free to stand. You're welcome to stand.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
If you like. Oh, good.
My brain works better when I'm standing up. So this report was launched a few weeks ago, Going with the Grain. Highly recommend you take a look. It's the culmination of 6 years of Simon Upton, the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, working in this land use space, and really it's the culmination of 20 plus years of thinking in New Zealand about this very difficult issue. That one? Yes. So very difficult to sum up this report in one slide, but I'll focus on the problems. The way we need to use the land needs to change. Roughly a third of catchments in the country will require some form of land use change to meet our environmental goals. So that's quite a staggering statistic. Second point, I mean, the changing climate is going to cause some change anyway, and land use change really is a constant in New Zealand. The third point is that the policy landscape on environmental issues is incredibly fragmented. We're trying to manage climate emissions, fresh water, biodiversity, climate adaptation, all in different silos, and this lands on landowners and just confuses the hell out of them, basically. And the last point is that from the perspective of landowners, they want to be regulated on an outcome basis for what's coming off their property. And frankly, that's also an unrealistic expectation. So that's kind of the problem that we have, and what we're suggesting is we need to take an integrated approach to environmental policy, to land use change. We've been trying to regulate the rump of, if you excuse my pun, of farmers to shift to meet our environmental goals. Regulation's an important part of the picture, but it'll only work on the real laggards. What we're trying is simply not working, and what we're suggesting, which I won't go into detail, because land use change is hard, there's a lot of barriers, but what we're suggesting is we need to create an ecosystem which really encourages local communities to come together, get informed on the issues, and come up with local solutions to the challenges they face in their catchment, ideally via catchment groups. That's the proposal we're putting forward. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Geoff and Robyn.
I was sitting there thinking, Andrew showed us some really great optimism, and then I've read Geoff's report, and it's deeply challenging in so many ways. There's one thing I keep saying to farmers, though, if there's one place, and I spent the first part of my career in Western Australia, where climate change hit in 1977, and it's gone backwards since. There's one place globally I'd want to be producing food in 2050, it is here in New Zealand. And we've got to be ready, I think, Andrew, for those opportunities that the changing climate are going to provide, don't we? And a global market that will pay for it. So just a quick summary of what we've been doing within the National Science Challenge, Our Land and Water, our program Aotearoa. Great team of colleagues from across private industry, universities and CRIs. What we did was set out to bring the data together that farmers can use as they consider the kind of things Andrew's showing us and to meet the challenges that we're seeing. So we've looked at suitability. So you can find data, it's in something called the data supermarket. We've looked at suitability and yield. We've looked at the economics for the individual farm and actually right through to the impact for the community of these sorts of crops. And some of that really, really hard to find data, Simon Harris from our team's done an amazing job of pulling together some of these data to give you a sense of the kind of yields you might expect, revenue, expenses, capital, employment and infrastructure. And we've been as transparent as we can of where the data's come from and what it's suitable for. We've also gone out over a couple of iterations with Our Land and Water and worked with farmers. We worked with 4 farms across 3 sectors in the Waimakariri, and they chose what they wanted to look at. So all the farms wanted to look at edible fungi, and we're really proud to say that our sheep and beef farm is actually taking on edible fungi because, Andrew, it fits easily into their system. They don't have to change a fence, had a relatively low capital to get into it, and their farm is adjacent to a real foodie town, so that was an easy fit for them. Apples, hops, also agrivoltaics. So we tried to challenge the farmers as well as have them choose where they wanted to go. But what did we come up with? Not enough capital. The time period, Andrew, for the payback for some of these crops, they couldn't see how they would make it work. Yeah, and the confidence to actually take it on. So we came to the conclusion that the future of some of these developments will be in the hands of the corporate families who've got enough scale, in the hands of the companies like My Farm, who've got the scale and the expertise, and in the partnerships, the global investors who want to invest. So it's easy to say we can transition to changing land uses. It's how we do it. We have to be really aware. So this is the data supermarket. There's where you find it. Everything is in one place. It's highly transparent and it won't cost you anything. It is designed as a repository, so it doesn't have a clean front end on it for you, so you need your own GIS skills. But already, Manaki Whenua Landcare Research have pulled it into our environment. The suitability maps are already there. So see Annabelle or myself if you need the address for it. It's not hard to find, and it's all in one place. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Robyn. Okay, I want to kick off. You mentioned, Robyn, that you read the report. Sorry, I'm gonna put you both right up front and center here. Robyn, you read the report that came out from Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, and you found it challenging. What did you find challenging about it?
Look, I think there wasn't much new in it, truthfully, but the great thing about it was everything is in one place. It pops the bubble that many people had 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Oh, look, if we just get our farmers to transform their land uses, we'll solve all the problems. and I think it pops that bubble. I worry about the pressure that you're putting on catchment groups, because I think we had some visionaries yesterday talking about catchment groups, but they cannot be highly effective catchment groups and the policeman and the regulator. Andrew, you're a catchment chair. Can you be all of those things?
No, you can't.
But your sense of place and your place in ownership is powerful to motivating people, though.
Yes.
As long as you're not the policeman.
It's catchment groups are a journey, and they reflect the population, and so we've got some sceptics.
Really? No.
So it's not all light and rainbows out there.
But then Geoff did say the other day that he could just choose the 3 farms in the catchment and we could put them all into wetlands. So how would that go? Especially if it was your farm.
Well, can I clarify?
Defend yourself.
This was actually a conversation that has been happening in a catchment group in Southland, where they have. I mean, what's needed to have these conversations is really good information, and Thriving Southland has really invested in catchment groups and really invested in good conversation, good information, and some of those catchments are talking about, well, actually, if we took out a few farms in this catchment, the rest, those are the hot spots that are driving most of the pollution in the catchment, and that would solve most of the issues.
So I get that, and what are those 3 farms worth, though, Andrew, and can we afford it?
If changing 3 properties in a catchment of how many properties? Several hundred?
Yeah.
Several hundred. It could well be the most financial and best economic thing to do. So if that's the case, I'd imagine a financial solution could be wrapped around that.
From government? Or
from farmers, from local community, maybe from processors, maybe from outside investors that would be prepared to provide some sort of financing to achieve the outcome, get some sort of return, but also do some good.
So then the second challenge to that, though, the wetland is a little bit of the ambulance at the bottom of the hill?
We need all the ambulances. I mean, ko takitimu te waka, the land use change has been occurring for centuries. The farm, my wife and I farm, was originally rainforest, and now we're through 6 generations of dairy farming. It's taken us a long time to get to where we are. I worry that we are placing our short-term timelines on trying to achieve some of this change. Farmers are not necessarily best positioned to manage some of the change.
So, Andrew, you even talked... Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, Robyn.
Unrealistic timelines are a big concern.
Yeah, and I totally agree there. Some of these problems are going to take a generation, perhaps 2, to. But the trouble is, we haven't even really left the starting line on a lot of this stuff. We haven't even, with the exception of where farmers have taken action off their own bat. We're not even seeing things start to head in the right direction in a lot of places.
Andrew, can I ask a question for you?
Yes.
You spoke about the project of converting that land, which might be challenging for other uses, into Manuka forest and the return that you got on that. Can you talk a little bit about the capital necessary to achieve some of these projects? And when farmers are looking at joining into catchment groups or engaging in any of these land use change initiatives, tell us about the capital story.
Yeah. So I think all of us would ultimately want our piece of land to be used for its optimum best use. And we have to reflect that markets come and go, and that optimum best use will change over time. Planting a property in Manuka forest is probably a one-way bet. It's not going back to pasture from that. It can remain a Manuka forest, or perhaps it'll end up being just native bush over time. If we can get sufficient return to get our money back over the first 10 or 12 years, then that's going to de-risk that very long-term future, because we've at least got our money back in simple terms. One of the challenges with land use change is the capital required, and we have discussions about wanting to double the value of exports in New Zealand. Well, some very good work done by a friend of mine, Tim Morris at Coriolis Research, says for every extra dollar, he's done this research in West Australia, for every extra dollar of exports, you need somewhere between 50 cents and $1.50 of capital investment. And so we don't talk about this capital story enough in New Zealand, in my view. Farmers are not generating enough cash to retain and to reinvest. Our banks are probably over-leveraged to the sector. We don't have our KiwiSaver really set up to invest alongside us in agribusiness, and we've got really tight overseas capital rules. So when we think about land use change, what's going to fund it? Kiwi fruit, of the $1 million, about 150,000 of it is the land. A Manuka forest, it might be worth $11,000 or $12,000 a hectare, of which $6,000 or $7,000 is the land. So we've got to access some capital to do that. If you're a farmer, can you do that? Can you partner with somebody to achieve some land use change? Or should we think about our capital as being mobile, sell this property and redeploy in a slightly different sector within agribusiness? So, yeah, capital is a challenge, but money will flow to investment opportunity and good cause. So there are solutions there.
Geoff, does your report address capital necessary for any land use transitions?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that we looked at was, the fact that often there's what we call in economics a coordination failure with this sort of thing. That land uses to be sustainable will need processing and distribution nearby. This is why we have such a large status quo bias in our land use choices at the moment. And if catchments are going to look at wholesale land use change, there will need to be, in some of the case study we looked at loans to help farmers transition and to help set up the processing and distribution that might be needed. Now, of course, then where does the money come from for the loan? Well, there's a number of ways that the government could generate some cash to to push forward this land use change conversation. The biggest one I would say is that we have, and I realise that the ETS is being put to good use in your case, Andrew, but I think we have an ETS which is taking money from fossil fuel users and spraying it at land use change, which is in some cases is working really well. I think Andrew's example is a good case of that. But in some cases, we're not getting the so-called right tree in the right place, and I think that is an enormous source of capital that could be directed a lot more smartly.
Geoff, you obviously are, you and the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment are obviously big fans of the catchment group approach. We heard some great stuff about catchments yesterday. Robyn, your thoughts on the catchment approach?
The catchment approach, the catchment is connected by place. It is such a powerful social network. It's such a powerful network in time of need. Many years ago when my mother died, we got 26 fruitcakes from our catchment. Fruitcakes keep so well, of course. And we see incredible activity from our catchment groups. Emma and Stu yesterday were inspiring. Catchment groups do and will continue to have a role. But for the rest of us urban dwellers to expect their shoulders are broad enough to deliver on our national bottom line aspirations without a whole lot of support, both to be highly functional catchment groups, the science tools, the skilled people to help them on their journey, and then that reality that Andrew has already said. How quickly can we bring about that change? It's taken his family 6 generations to get their dairy farm to where it is, and yet we want change in 5 years. So that is what I worry about for our catchment groups. I really worry they have such an important task, but they can't be the regulator and the policeman.
Yeah. Look, when you face any problem, you've got to start by defining it. You've got to measure and then identify remedies. So one of the risks with regulation is that you try and impose outcomes before we've defined the problem and develop the remedy. So many farmers are doing their best. I think many of the initiatives are really good. We do need to hurry up and wait in some perspectives. But if we deploy new capital, that's an opportunity to do the things the best. But if we've got limited capital, limited profitability, we can only do what we can do at the speed we can do it. So,
yeah, can I I mean, I'm going to furiously agree with you there. I mean, good information is fundamental to this whole conversation, and we have raced ahead trying to regulate without providing farmers with good information on. I mean, a lot of good environmental information is actually out there, but we don't collect it in one place and make it accessible for people to use. So everyone's out there reinventing the wheel, paying 20, 30 grand for good information to be able to do a real top quality. The farmers that are really trying to do a really good job on their farm plans are paying top dollar for the right information to be able to do that. That seems to me to be absolutely crazy. We should be providing this information, free and make it accessible for farmers to use if we want these sort of big decisions to be made.
This is really the work you're doing, Robyn, eh?
Well, which is what we've tried to do with the Aotearoa work. Some of that work, we only have climate data at 5 kilometre by 5 kilometre. So if someone tries to tell you they've got better than that, then they must have their own local weather stations. And I hate to say, but if we look up the east coast of the North Island, the S-maps are big gaps.
Yep.
So we don't have any data up there. And we've got that really big challenge around our water data. And we worry about that as scientists because the water movement across the New Zealand landscape is very complex. And just taking a sample in your local stream and then using it may not be the right thing to do. And that's where you need those right partnerships, don't you?
in some ways, this conversation is about innovation and change. If we look at New Zealand's pastoral landscape, we had a competitive advantage with the production system we operated, lowest cost of production in the world. What we've seen, though, is decreasing costs of production on cereal and other fodder crops. We've seen the mechanisation of production systems, the scaling of production systems. So we're seeing chicken, pork, now dairy products being produced using industrial methods, which produce...
Here?
No, offshore,
okay.
Because we're exporters, so we're exporting. And so our traditional competitive advantage is being eroded, in my view, and that's why farmers here are struggling for profitability, and we're struggling for to build our wealth. So some of the things that got us here are not going to be the things that get us to the future. So how do we take people out? How do we reduce interventions with animals? How do we ensure more productive, more sustainable pastures and production systems? So there's a relentless need to innovate. There's a relentless need to change. We think about land use change. That's a massive change. That's a swap from one industry to another. But can we deploy land use change incrementally and learn and go as we move? But when obviously farmers in this audience know, people work with farmers in this know, there's challenges around basic economics and economic performance, as well as climate, nutrients, people.
And yet we've got so much opportunity though, Andrew, because we are one of the best places when we think about climate. We have an abundance of sunshine and rainfall. And actually, we can double our horticulture, double our arable, double our forestry, and still have a lot of grazing landscapes left, aren't we?
But all of those things might require 80 to 100 billion of capital that we don't have.
Well, we had some farmers the other day, they've put 12 hectares of cherries in, high-risk crop,
Yep.
250,000 a hectare to establish it. They already owned the land, 25,000 a hectare to maintain it over the first 4 years, and they said deep sense of sheer relief when they managed to get decent-sized cherries. That's a big commitment, isn't it? It's a commitment in skills, knowledge, risk. Yeah.
And the big barrier there is water, right? I mean, to really expanding our hort and arable...
They had to have a very large chopper to dry the rain off the cherries before they could harvest them, of course. But certainty of water, yes. But we've got more water in New Zealand than pretty much anyone else in the world per person. We just need it in the right place at the right time, right?
Absolutely.
So, Andrew, more capital, please.
Well, is capital going to solve it, though, Andrew? Because, we don't really have we don't have a rational system of allocating water, do we? I mean, that seems to me...
Well, it's very rational if you've got your water now, though, Geoff.
I love Andrew here in the middle with Geoff and Robyn, like, come on, Andrew, give us money. Do we have enough water?
Well, if I want to be a cherry farmer, if I want to be a kiwi fruit grower, if I want to be a Manuka forest owner, if I want to be a sheep farmer, it's going to take some capital to do those things. Personally, I'm sceptical, I'm just being honest, about establishing hops in Canterbury. Maybe it'll work. It's hard enough.
Tell us why. Tell us why, please.
It's hard enough to do hops in the prime area of Nelson when it's very difficult to sell the product. So land use change is not easy. It needs to be exceptionally well executed. You need to de-risk as many aspects as you can. So the Manuka we're doing in partnership with Convita, as it happens. So it's a profit-sharing model. We're not taking on board costs. So there's a whole lot of things that you need to consider. And is it our capital that's going to do this, or are we going to be the change agent that earns a good return and gets some rewards via the use of our time in order to affect it? There is inevitably a de-linkage, unfortunately, between ownership, management and control, which is probably a challenge for us.
I love that you raised the partnership with Convita, because one of the things that this often comes back to is business model, economics, practicality, feasibility. I talk to Adama Kukutai pretty regularly. We've hosted him here at Tipu. Adama is the chief executive of Plenty, which is a large vertical farming company in the U.S. He is a Kiwi boy, Maori boy, gone to the U.S. And one of their biggest focuses is what are the offload contracts. So if we're going to be de-risking a shift to cherries, for example, or a shift to kiwi fruit, or a shift to whatever it is, who's going to uptake all of that output?
And I think that's what we see with our farmers in Canterbury all the time. Andrew, they could grow anything. And they say, tell us what to grow. Who's going to pay? They've got good quality water. Who's going to pay us enough to make it worth our while?
I don't think they can grow everything.
Anything?
No,
anything.
I don't think they can.
There's a lot of things they could grow.
They can, yeah.
including hops if you put the right shelter in, right?
I want to come back for a moment to the data conversation. So you mentioned about the climate data across New Zealand coming in at 5 kilometers, particularly up the East Coast. And we didn't discuss this beforehand. So if I'm throwing something at you, then forgive me, but I feel like y'all are up for it. So I've got a lot of bones to pick with generative AI generally. But one of the prime use cases where I'm seeing it being used effectively is in climate modeling, and is in getting climate modeling down to a degree of detail that is much greater than what we've seen historically. Any thoughts, experience, observations on that front, or is this just like, Kyla, come on?
I mean, I think remote sensing and AI is, together as a potentially very powerful tool in the environmental/land use space. Dr. John Reid in Canterbury is doing quite a lot of work on this out of another one of the national science challenges, and it looks quite promising. And can I just say what Robyn can't say right now, which is it's absolutely crazy to be closing down our national science challenges right now when. Yeah.
And to take up that point, I think the opportunities that will come for our farming from technologies including generative AI will be outstanding. I love the story of my farmer in Australia who was much happier because he changed weather forecaster. And I said, is it raining anymore? He said, no, but the new one's so much more optimistic. I at least think it's going to be better. But I think we are on the edge of seeing those benefits coming our way. Yeah.
One of the limitations of horticulture, you'd be surprised to know, is the amount of labour that it's required. So on my dairy farm, we're spending about 15 to 20% of our cost is labour, and we're doing everything to try and make the job easier and the labour demands less. In kiwi fruit production, 60 to 70% of our cost base is related to labour. So that's going to get more expensive and harder to obtain. So just like manufacturing's taken labour out, how do we take labour out of agriculture and horticulture? So that industry is ripe for the use of autonomous vehicles, imaging technology. Maybe a while before we pick kiwi fruit, robotically, but there's a lot of other tasks that can be undertaken using that sort of technology.
Amazing. We've got some questions coming through from the audience. Just time for a few of these questions here. Right. So question one is from Jonathan Cameron, who says, this panel shows the divergent views and challenges. How do we demystify this for landowners? Geoff.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, that really is the challenge here. We are talking about making some pretty big calls on the basis of what we right now is really insufficient data, and that's I guess we come back to Andrew's point of that we need a system which helps people make these decisions over the next 30, 40 years. It's not gonna happen overnight. It is going to take a while. It's going to take some experimentation and learning along the way. And we have to do it carefully.
I think between Geoff's report and the PCE report and all of the work that's come out of the National Science Challenges, we're at a bit of a crossroads, because I think a lot of people thought this was quite straightforward. Let's just take our farmers on this transformative journey. Our farmers have known this forever. I look back to how my grandparents farmed, how my parents farmed. Looking at what the model that Andrew's been running, he's talking about how difficult it is, how many labour units. Farming already knows that. It's about everyone getting on the journey of what everyone's expectations are. And the thing we're seeing right now, I guess, Andrew, is the speed of change, of pressure that's coming from global, be it the banks or be it the processors.
I mean, for me, it's about being curious, and we all need to be curious about how we can adapt and adopt other ideas to our farming systems. To be curious, I think it pays to have an optimistic bent, and it also probably pays to be younger. So I think where we're sitting today, most farmers are not that curious for a range of reasons. They're probably fearful. So there's a challenge around mindset, and in essence, that's what policymakers, industry leaders, catchment groups need to engender.
Amazing. Curiosity. We don't have time for any more questions, but just one final comment I'll share from Chanel O'Sullivan, who says, instead of land use change, which feels like switching one for the other, we could also talk about land use diversification. So we're going to leave that as a thing to ponder. Ladies and gentlemen, please, a massive round of applause for our panel. Thank you so much.